Hey, everybody. Welcome again to Wrestling Coast to Coast, wrestling and everything coast to coast. Tonight's a very special show. I'm dedicating it to my sensei, friend, to myself for decades, friend to everybody in wrestling, boxing, MMA, acting, stunt work. He has a record number, perhaps on the planet, of anybody, well over 1,100 movies and TV credits. Russell put up. And I want to thank Evan Ginsberg and Russ for really helping out here. Evan Ginsberg is launching, he's away for a third week, but he's launching his brand new blog, evanginsberg.com. He's got all kinds of exciting things going on. But he wanted this to be a full Gene Lebell, Judo Gene Lebell, the godfather of grappling tribute. And that is what we are doing. We have from Slam back again, our in-house family member, Jonathan Schwartz. Slam.
Thanks for having me.
Canadian historian, bon vivant, and everything. But, we lost a number of great legends recently. Obviously Anne Heche, everybody is reeling from that. Olivia Newton-John. And Jonathan, you don't know this, but they filmed all of the exterior scenes from the movie Grease with Travolta, and all the carnival stuff. Everything was at the football field of my high school, John Marshall High School, in the Los Feliz area, like East Hollywood, 3 blocks from the ABC TV studios and Paramount and all of that stuff. That's why they ended up using my high school during the summer when there wasn't even any summer school because they were doing renovation there. But they filmed that at my high school. Gene Lebell was not in that, but he was in almost everything else. We have another photo at some point tonight.
Yeah, no legendary fight scenes in Grease, actually, right?
No Grease. But of him, the legendary thing, and just look it up if you need to hear about it. And we're crediting, of course, people. I do shoot and work for Mike Warner at the Associated Press. So that's an AP photo, Gene Lebell choking out. We don't have any video, nor could we probably use it, of Gene Lebell choking out Steven Seagal, who was being obnoxious on a movie set, saying he'd never, ever been put to sleep. No MMA person could do that to him. Gene Lebell, of course, did it to him. And he was, as Khosrow Vaziri, Iron Sheik would say, humbled like a mofo. And Gene Lebell was a mofo that we all love and respect.
In fact, here's that picture that you're talking about.
Yeah. And Gene, the funny thing, so for many people around the U.S. at least, until the Ali-Inoki fight in '76, where Gene was the referee, but he was also the in-ring sort of policeman conduit between Inoki and Ali. And Fred Blassie had been a big part of that too, in trying to help book the thing. If you want a great read, a buddy of mine who interviewed myself and Meltzer and others for it's a whole book devoted to Ali and Inoki. I don't have it in front of me since I moved, but it's still available in stores and Amazon. And we're going to, of course, have Jonathan Schwartz plug anything and everything Slam and otherwise tonight, as we dedicate, though, our entire show tonight to Judo Gene Lebell. But Gene Lebell, obviously all the specifics. That he helped train Ronda Rousey. I don't know, haven't confirmed with her that he helped train her mom, who was also judo class athlete, but he helped train Ronda for the Olympics, and he helped train her for pro. He finessed so many people. A lot of folks don't know. So where I worked, I was one of several ringside photographers for our program for the Los Angeles Cal Eaton, later the Mike Lebell promotion. Eileen Eaton had married our wrestling promoter, Cal Eaton, who kind of went to war with Jules Strongbow, who also had his own promotion in the 50s. And then Cal Eaton kind of won that, and they came to an agreement where Jules would come to work for Cal Eaton as the booker. But Eileen Eaton was Cal's wife and her last husband, after marrying the Lebell that she had those 2 children, Mike and Gene, with. Cal Eaton dies in '67, right after we have the dissolution of the WWA. So Bobo Brazil dropped in a unification his title. It was a draw, but he dropped. There's Gene with Ronda Rousey. But Bobo drops the NWA strap, even though it was a draw, which made no sense, with Muchnick sitting front row, to then NWA champion Gene Kiniski. The WWA is no more. Cal Eaton has passed. Eileen has her older son, Mike Lebell, become the promoter. Mike had very little experience with promoting or pro wrestling. He didn't love pro wrestling the way Gene had. I mean, Gene was gracious enough. He was doing jobs for us in Los Angeles wearing a full body suit as the masked hangman. And the Marks didn't know who he was. They didn't know because he would sometimes work as himself, as Judo Gene Lebell. But later on, from 1970 on, he was doing locker room interviews as like this schlubby, less than 6 foot tall guy. The fans, the Marks, had no clue that this guy was the baddest mofo on the planet. Judo, Olympic guy, all this MMA stuff, grappling. He knew everything. He worked actually in the territories. Like he worked in Amarillo, 63, 64, a couple of shots, and Kansas City, etc. But in LA, he's doing the locker room interviews. He's overreacting to guys like John Tolis, Blassie, Ernie Ladd, Neil Moskowitz, etc. with his trademark, whoa, after they cut a promo. It was fantastic, acting like they could kick his ass when in reality he could kick theirs. The infamous story, Dan Westbrook, who was one of my ringside photographer brothers for the Olympic Auditorium, although I was the only one who actually went and shot backstage. I think Theo Eric just once or twice, but I did that routinely, as did Dave Brzezinski, who we'll have a quote from too. Dave Brzezinski and Terry at the Big Time Memories, the Detroit fantastic weekly free documentary. Just go to Big Time Memories, and they've done everything. They're in season, I think they just completed season 2. Fantastic stuff there. But Gene Lebell was doing the commentary, and then he's doing the locker room interviews, and then he took over the play-by-play when Dick Lane quit over money, an argument with Mike Lebell, his brother. So it's like in our promotion, and the boys, the workers, they didn't care for Mike Lebell so much. They loved Gene Lebell. Gene Lebell loved wrestling. Obviously, then people started figuring out who he was, reffing the Ali Inoki thing. And Inoki, so here's my point. First, Baba, in the promotion, Ricky Dozan's old promotion before Bob and Inoki both left, and formed their own promotions circa December 72. But Baba sends in Great Kajika for Gene to train. And then Gene, of course, worked and sent him over to Dory Funk Sr. and Dory and Terry in Amarillo. And they send him back a polished wrestler. Baba, uses him in Japan Pro, etc., and later for a time in All Japan. And then Inoki, when we changed our affiliation in Los Angeles, the Lebell territory, around late 73, early 74, from All Japan to New Japan, Inoki started sending guys left and right. His own talent from Fujinami to Choshu to Ryuma Go, quite a few other guys came in from New Japan. And then Inoki would ask, and Sakaguchi would ask Gene Lebell to train guys they wanted to come into New Japan from Canada and the U.S., like Bad News Allen, Coage. There is Judo Gene Lebell with the original Red Shoes Johnny Dugan. The current New Japan referee, Red Shoes, big mark for both Gene Lebell and Red Shoes Dugan are famous, long-time, decades-long high-flying referee, and that's his character, So, Jonathan, you're aware of Red Shoes, the referee in New Japan, aren't you?
Yes. Well, you still see him pretty much every week refereeing the big bouts.
Lead referee, and a lot of folks don't know it came from Johnny Red Shoes Dugan, who is our senior referee, but we would send him and some of our refs to both New Japan and All Japan. Jerry Murda and Hank Matheny are refs. These are like old dudes. They would send them to All Japan, but Johnny Dugan, who was older, but man, could he move. And you didn't see a referee, not Dick Worley or Dick Kroll from Tri-WF, who also did special stuff going into Japan. But Johnny Dugan in the 70s, early 80s, reffed in New Japan, and then he did some stuff before he retired for Vince Jr. when he went national. But so Alan Bad News Coage, a young judo Chris Adams came into our territory. So his first territory outside of the UK, comes to LA. He works with Gene Lebell. That was the primary reason he went there. He gets sent over a la the Guerreros and Al Madril, who Gene Lebell finessed, to New Japan. And so many guys. Obviously, when Roddy Piper came in, and the deal with Piper is he breaks in Winnipeg, goes to do a few shots in Kansas City, where I shot him, photos of him there. And then he goes to Houston, where co-booker to genius, big-hearted promoter Paul Bosch, Red Bastien, who was a liaison with Lebell in LA, he sends Roddy to go to work for Roy Shire in San Francisco, thinking it'd be perfect for Roy, but he sent him in to do a couple of shots for us, a week's worth in LA first. So long story short, Roddy debuts, I believe it was January 20th, 1976, in our annual first card of the year, 22-man battle royal. He's in the second match of the night from the bottom, second up from the bottom, against Tony Rocco, two bland faces. Piper didn't have his shtick. Our booker then, once Jules Strongbow retired, was former father-son wrestler, meaning the son, Leo Garibaldi. Leo, genius guy, best friends with Red Bastien. Anyway, he says, I see something in this kid. Don't go up to Shire just yet. So within 6 days, he finessed the whole Roddy Piper thing. Had Roddy do the bagpipes, wear the kilt, wear the T-shirts that also our territory wrestler Lars Anderson, luscious Lars Anderson, would make, and Roddy would ask for like a little saying on his shirt. New saying every Wednesday TV, commenting on current events in the world, like, whatever President Ford was doing and falling down, Roddy might have a saying on his shirt. Whatever was going on with entertainment, pop culture, when punk rock started at some clubs in LA, he would have like the names of some punk bands like the Dickies on a T-shirt that Lars Anderson had made. And anyway, so Gene finessed Roddy, however, and got him dieting and lifting weights and trying to, build him up, because Roddy came in as a pimply-faced, pimply-backed young kid who looked all of 16 to us. And he eventually...
Piper was a really skinny guy when he started. Piper started off somewhere between, I think, 165 and 180. And he was never that tall. And he basically came into the U.S. From having worked across Canada, primarily in Winnipeg, did a couple of shots in Toronto. Actually, I may be off in my chronology, but had worked a little bit in New York as well for the WWF.
He went in one shot. And the one thing was interesting.
Nothing really came of it.
In our territory, Vince would ask Lebell to send in a monthly guy. Like, for example, Eddie Graham was sending up Mike Graham and himself and some others. Vern sent in Billy Robinson, one time only, sadly, for Madison Square Garden, who went nuts for him. But Mike Lebell sent first Chavo Guerrero, and that was my shot on the cover of Chavo for the Madison Square Garden program. And then he sends a couple of months later Roddy Piper, and that's my shot of Piper on the MSG program that Jeff Walton, our publicist, and everything else, my immediate boss besides Gene Lebell in the LA territory, sent that. But he sends in Piper, and very quickly, because Gene always loved asking Roddy to tell this story. So Roddy is there, still with the bleach blonde hair, for his MSG debut, 77. And he didn't come back until he came back when Vince went national. So it's one and only, one time only. And Albano and Blassie, part of that managerial triumvirate with Ernie Roth, the Grand Wiz, had been watching him on the TV. Our television, our Wednesday night TV, the Spanish version, was syndicated by the SIN, Spanish International Network, to New York, Boston, parts of Florida like Miami, where there were Hispanic populations. Not our all-English Saturday night one, hosted by Dick Lane and Jimmy Lennon Jr. And I should point out that before I got my license to drive a couple of times, Gene Lebell and Jimmy Lennon Sr., our ring announcer, who was greater even than the Fink, you got to hear Jimmy Lennon Sr.'s voice to know what I'm talking about. Although he didn't announce for as many important events, certainly, as Howard Finkel, who was a great brother of mine that we lost, a good year plus ago. But anyway, so Albano and Blassie had been watching the tapes that were on, like a week late New York would get, and they just didn't think much of this skinny kid at all. So long story short, and Gene loved hearing this, they went and got a bunch of Kleenex and paper towels and shoved it into the bagpipes. Jonathan, do you want to tell what you heard about this? They did that intentionally. So when Roddy goes to play it in the ring to get some heat, like the fans had been clamoring for at MSG, because they'd seen him do it on TV, no notes, no music came out. But what did you?
Well, they basically submarined him.
Oh yeah.
And they did it as a rip, basically, from backstage, and he, from what I recall, it's pretty much a nothing match. He's working against a much bigger, more experienced opponent. Not somebody who's...
It was either Jose Estrada or Johnny Rodz.
I think Johnny Rodz.
Yeah. And
Johnny Rodz figures in later because Johnny Rodz also worked extensively on the West Coast as Java Rook.
Oh, let me tell you that story.
Okay.
Let me tell you that one, because Gene Lebell's involved. So he came in. Vince Sr. would send in some of his job guys. I hate calling him that. Enhancement, like S.D. Jones, who we, of course, put the America's Tag Team title on, with Tom Jones, a wrestler out of Leroy McGurk and Sheik's territory, who was like an underneath guy. But, of course, well, the promotion called them the Jones Boys, which I thought was kind of racist sounding at the time. But whatever. S.D. Jones, very charismatic, and Tom Jones, too. They got over with the crowd. But when Johnny Rodz came in, he finesses the Sheik copycat gimmick of Java Rook. But Gene said, well, why don't we just do some play on your name so we don't have to change the initials on your tights and your boots from JR. And they came up, he, Piper, and Johnny Rodz with Java Rook. They looked up some kind of, I don't know, stuff on the Middle East and I guess religious stuff, and somehow came up with that name, which might be inappropriate. I don't know, might have angered some Middle Eastern American fans and Canadian folks and stuff. But
gotta love wrestling geography. I still don't get how Gorilla Monsoon's from Manchuria.
Said Gene had taught Roddy how to speak. In fact, the tagline that Roddy would use every week when he started going and when Gene was working with him on promos was T-bone steaks and barbell plates. And Gene fed him that. And so Gene suggested, and I'm sure Jeff Walton will qualify that if he's listening, that Java Rook was Roddy Piper's first gig. No one had ever done this in LA. So Roddy's wrestling as the lead heel, but he's also managing a stable of heels. And they're all battling the Guerrero family at this point. And the next guy that Roddy managed was Adrian Adonis under his real name of Keith Franks. And of course, the Lonnie Main series until Lonnie Lane died, but Outlaw Ron Bass. And so Russ, you're going through looking for some audio clips of Roddy from the LA territory days, of Gene Lebell, actually, I'm sorry, interviewing the guys. But do you remember, were you getting, I don't know if you were too young to watch that, but our Wednesday night TV, Lucha Libre from the Olympic Auditorium, the 90-minute show, was airing right after Roy Shire's show on the same Sacramento channel, whatever the call letters were, Channel 40 out of Sacramento. Do you remember, were you too young to have watched all of that? Because Roddy was managing a whole slew, like another guy.
Yeah, keep in mind, I was born in 1967. So, a lot of the stuff that you're talking about.
So I'm talking 1978, 79.
Yeah, that 1978. So I was 9 years old or 10 years old. So I wasn't able. The only thing I could ever watch was big time wrestling on in the Bay Area, because
that was Roy Shire, the name of his promotion.
Yeah, that's the only. We didn't get any other feds or anything until I got Mid-South in the mid '80s to come in through TBS.
Right. The one guy, another talent, and I forget the name, his real name that he used in New Japan, but he came in for us, and Gene named him Dr. Hiro Oda. That was a New Japan guy that Roddy Piper managed. So there's a slew of all these guys. And then a tertiary thing that Gene Lebell had Roddy do when they were watching wrestling from Mexico, the Paco Luderoth promotion, then still Salvador Luderoth's, was heel managers. So Roddy is lead heel for a good full 2 years before he left full-time for Portland and finished off in San Francisco for Roy Shire. And he is also managing a stable of heels, and now he's heel reffing. He's screwing over the baby faces, and he's coming out with his referee's license, and he's doing the pantomime where you hold the ref's shirt and you point to the NWA sign. Oh, you can't punch me, I'm a ref. You'll get fined and suspended. So he's doing all of these crazy things, and he's teaming with the last guy he managed, and then they were teaming. They held the America's Tag Championships, and they were going after the entire Guerrero crew. By this point, all of them had come in, meaning first Chavo debuted and was finessing with Gene Lebell with his dad, Gory. So I have shots of Gory and Gene Lebell working with Chavo, and then they do all these months of vignettes, and Mondo comes in, and finally Hector. But Roddy and his whole crew, and then just Roddy and Lonnie Main are feuding with the Guerrero family. But up in San Francisco, Lonnie Main's turned babyface, and he's feuding with Roddy at the very same time on Roy Shire's TV, Big Time Wrestling TV, as they're getting our show right after, where Roddy and Moondog Lonnie Main are teaming as heels, our lead heels, the killer heels. So talk about breaking KF, but let me shut up and throw to Jonathan for a sec on our Judo Gene Lebell, the Godfather of Grappling tribute show.
Sure. I think that the most impressive thing, if you look at the totality of his career going back, you see that he was really a pioneer, both in terms of mixed martial arts. He actually participated in what some consider to be the first MMA bout against Milo Savage. And that in itself is a pretty impressive story, just in terms of the amount of gamesmanship that went on between Lebell and his camp and Savage and his camp till the match actually took place. And then there was an attempt at a double cross mid-match. You look at his involvement in, as you'd mentioned, Ali and Inoki. You look at, for even something as recent as the Steven Seagal incident that you mentioned, where Seagal had pretty much made a career out of bragging about his prowess in Aikido and saying that because of his training in that discipline, nobody could get an effective chokehold on him, nobody could put him out. And the story goes that one day he was talking smack on set. I think it was for the movie Under Siege, and Lebell happened to come up and challenge Seagal and put him in a chokehold, and very quickly not only put him out, but put him out to the point that that Seagal lost control of some of his bodily functions. And what's interesting is Seagal would go on to deny that it ever happened, and basically to really say mean things about Lebell after the fact. Lebell never dignified that with a response. He gave what I would consider the classic working pro wrestling answer. He declined to say whether the event happened or not. He said that there were 30 people in the room. Let somebody else talk about it.
Oh, he admitted to us in private. Actually, he told somebody at the Roddy Memorial, Gene Lebell helped Mitch Ackerman, who was Roddy's longtime film, TV manager, agent, did a lot of things for Roddy, let him crash at his house when he'd come down from Hillsboro, Oregon to film TV and movies and stuff. When he wasn't at the facility where Gene Lebell introduced he and Terry Funk to stay at, which was like a long-term rental place, the Wood something apartments in the Valley, in Valley Village, almost near Universal Studios. That's where actors, particularly wrestlers, could get long-term gigs. So Gene Lebell helped Jesse Ventura, Terry Funk, and Roddy Piper, to name a few, find apartments. But Mitch Ackerman, after we were all at Roddy's actual funeral, near his home in Hillsboro, Oregon, about 8 days later, Mitch Ackerman, and he asked for my help and Gene Lebell's help to put a memorial on at the LA Comedy Store on Sunset Boulevard, right in full on Hollywood. And because Roddy, the movie and TV roles had sort of dried up, and Roddy thought he would try, he had done, and I'd seen some of these and photographed them for Roddy as one-man shows, and he thought about doing stand-up. So he had Will Sasso, longtime wrestling mark from big star of Mad TV on America's Fox channel. I'm not sure what it ran on up in Canada for you, Jonathan.
Oh, he's from Vancouver originally, I think. Will Sasso, he's Canadian.
Really?
Yeah.
He does like the best Steve Austin impression. And
he does.
But he was the lead guy of many comics at the Comedy Store, helping Roddy try to get into stand-up, because Roddy had seen like Colt Cabana, Mick Foley, and some others. I don't know if Dolph Ziggler was already doing it. Yeah, he was, because Roddy died in 2015 or 16. But at that memorial, like everybody from boxing, wrestling, MMA, acting, all of his surviving co-stars from They Live came. But Gene gave one of the longest and best speeches talking about Roddy, and it was a big help on that. But I want to say, too, a lot of people forget that one of Bruce Lee's biggest supporters and friends, both in the JoJo and helping him with Hollywood stuff, was Bruce Lee, well before the Green Hornet TV show, where Bruce Lee was the sidekick Kato. And obviously people, I'm sure most of you guys know how much Gene helped Chuck Norris get into acting. And we haven't even touched. A lot of people kind of forget. They kind of remembered it, thankfully, on Busted Open, where I was on hold behind Tony Khan. I never did get on to talk about Gene Lebell's stunt work, but Gene Lebell was president of the Stuntmen's Association. He did a lot to help get that thing organized. And so that was really a bulk of his work, even though he had a lot of speaking roles, like on the Jack Benny TV show, where he's actually, I think he wasn't the ref as he was on the Munsters, with Herman Munster wrestling, Count Billy Varga, another Gene Lebell friend, but he actually wrestled through a dummy that was supposed to look like Jack Benny wrestling Gene Lebell, with Jimmy Lennon Sr. on commentary, and I think Dick Lane was doing, or Jimmy Lennon was the ring announcer, Dick Lane doing the commentary for that. I mean, Gene was in all of these movies and TV shows, but the brunt of his work and the stuff he was most proud of was the stunt work on a variety of things. I mean, both of you guys, have you seen Gene Lebell? He was on some show, I can't even recall now, where Edge from WWE, WWF at the time, I think it was still WWF, put him through a table or a couple of tables or something like that, ECW style. And Gene was already in his 80s. You know, so I forget which of these shows. It wasn't the weekly series that Edge was on for USA. But, you know, everybody sent me Edge, and Beth Phoenix had a lot of great things to say about Gene. God rest his soul. Ronda Rousey and Shayna Baszler had a lot of great things to say about Gene. And one thing that a lot of us who were Gene's friends, Jeff Walton and his son Scott, pointed this out, but Gene, from about 1975 on, every year he would send out a Christmas card, even though we are trying to figure out what exact religion Gene might have recognized or felt he was part of. As long as he was spiritual, I guess that's the bottom line. But we would always get a Christmas card, a holiday card, we'll call it, from Gene and Midge, his wife Midge and son David, and from about 75 on. But it would always have, Gene would have 1,000 of these. Every year they'd be different. They were cloth patches with a cartoon version of Gene doing something, you know, saying, please hire me, I'm broke, or, you know, just fooling around. But I saved all of those patches. I've got a complete set. They're all mounted. But Gene he was a motorcycle fanatic, and he had several motorcycles and, you know, a lot of guns. Anybody that went to his place in Studio City, lots of weapons and stuff. He was, you know, a man's man. But he had all those patches sewn onto both a jean jacket and a leather jacket that he wore. All of these patches that he'd made, send out to just his closest friends at the holidays. And, you know, just Mark and Gary Dawson, and that name may not mean a lot to you guys, but they were the sons of actor and comic Richard Dawson, who started with Hogan's Heroes in the States, even though he was this great stand-up comic in his native England, married to the Marilyn Monroe of the UK, Diana Dors. But he had these two sons, Mark and Gary, who I've known since like first, second grade. We would go to the wrestling shows together. I'd shoot ringside. Mark would shoot with like an 8mm camera front row. And that's like the only known footage of LA from late 72 through early 75, when Mark lost interest in wrestling. But Mark had a lot of memories of Gene taking us out and taking he and his brother Gary out separately with Gene's son David to, you know, after KCOP on Hollywood, you know, in Hollywood off of Sunset and Fairfax near Farmers Market. He would take him to Dupar's, where we went. A lot of different restaurants. I think he joined them when they were on a trip that I couldn't make in Oahu. Gene and Tolis were over there. Gene Lebell and Tolis, that is. John Tolis, who was like our lead face / heel for God knows how many years in the LA territory. And we do want to let you guys know, Darla Staggs will be on. We'll reschedule her. She was going to be on for our Gene Lebell tribute, but she was having problems with her Skype, so we will get her booked. We're fortunate enough to have Jonathan. So I'm going to shut up for a second, Jonathan. Let me let you talk about what's going on. Of course, we were going to have Darla on, and I wanted you and she to maybe talk about more representation and female empowerment in pro wrestling, which we still need. We're seeing so many great things. What a time it is to actually watch wrestling, because now I don't fast forward through like so many used to, WWE Raw and SmackDown. Never fast forward at NXT, but now you don't want to fast forward through any program. We're seeing more women, more people from different races and nationalities, and LGBT, etc. We're making little inroads, obviously way more to do. But Jonathan, do you see improving trends? I mean, the business seems fun again. It's not like the territories, my beloved territory days, but it is hella fun right now.
Oh, I don't think, barring a tremendous change in the way people do business, unfortunately, I don't think we are going to see the territories come back. What I do think that we stand to see, and I think that recent changes up at the top of the business between the advent of AEW and obviously the succession that's currently happening in WWE, is I would really love to see more room for smaller independent promotions. This is one thing that I've kind of found basically since then the WWF's national expansion, is that was really where you had the opportunity to build and create stars for tomorrow, so that by the time people would join WWF, they would be polished performers with an act, with a character in mind, and obviously they could be tweaked to suit a nationwide or international audience. But they got their reps.
Sorry to interrupt, but we had that announcement last year from the WWE where the WWE said, we're only going to take talent that we grow ourselves, and we're not going to take independent wrestling anymore, and independent wrestlers.
So I think we're going to see what happens.
That's out the window with Vince gone now. Everything is out the window with Hunter. It's a big positive.
Thankfully.
I agree.
Thankfully.
And I think that if I had my druthers, I think NXT in some respects has been a fantastic program, and they've put on, I would say, over the last couple of years, some of the best in wrestling, at least in North America. But I think that one of the challenges is that for having gotten rid of the base where people actually learn how to work a crowd and how to basically sustain an audience's interest and how to cut a promo that gets people, that sets an audience on fire, it's really difficult to do that from the confines of the Capitol Wrestling Center or the Performance Center, whatever you want to call it, and then to go from that directly to a 40,000 seat arena. So, and
Jonathan, I would say this too, is that there's when you work a WWE show, you don't get to work a bad crowd. When you work an indie show, you do get to learn how to work a bad crowd. And what do you do when only 50 people show up? I've been there with like Christopher Daniels.
They call that reps, and
they call it a bomb scare, is what they call it.
No, they call that
I've had to work bomb scares.
You need a lot of reps. That's why NXT has got all of these Florida tour dates. It's got very impressive, like 18 tour dates all throughout Florida, which is fantastic. You were seeing a lot of those guys they were all NXT black and gold, really the stars. These were people plucked. I mean, take, for example, TNA Impact. How many guys did they pluck from there? Eli Drake and Taya Valkyrie, tons and tons of talent. The North Carolina Caveman, what's that guy's name? What's his NXT name? He's now
Cameron Grimes.
Yeah, Cameron Grimes, who may go heel and join Joe Gacy, but that's another guy they got.
Joe Gacy himself.
Was he in the Impact?
He wasn't in Impact, but he came up through Combat Zone Wrestling and other smaller promotions. Yeah. He's a hardcore guy, basically.
So we haven't seen, I don't know if he's juiced yet on any of those, certainly not what we've seen, but perhaps like the pay-per-views. I haven't watched the NXT pay-per-views, just their TV so far. I was watching when the Black and Gold had the pay-per-views, which was spectacular. So now pretty much the money is on Johnny Gargano coming in the next week or two. So each week of Triple H, there's like a surprise NXT Black and Gold person. Obviously, last 2 weeks, Karrion Kross on SmackDown, the Dexter Lumis character, that was so done peripherally and quiet. Last, what was it, on Monday on Raw at the very end of the thing?
Oh, that within the context of the show, that was a brilliant bit of long form storytelling. I mean, they carried that through interview segment after backstage segment. And if you think about it, one of the criticisms of Raw, at least that I've had over the years is that so much of it is based on people just kind of standing around spouting wooden dialogue when they're backstage. And why should the camera be there? Well, finally, whoever is writing this has given us a reason to watch what's going on backstage. It was literal car crash television. Vince Russo would be proud.
Yeah. I mean, he did have that element to where it wasn't this, and there's such predictability. You know, when at least one of the guys goes outside the ring, they're going to break for commercial. It is so predictable when the commercial avails or ad spots.
It's even worse when it's a three-way match. You know, my least favorite match booked in the entire world is the three-way match, because you just know that one guy is going to go outside and take a breather for 15, 20 minutes while the other two work in the ring. And then right when one guy is about to pin the other one, the guy who's been somehow lying outside for 20 minutes for no problem at all comes into the ring, all house afire, breaks up the thing, throws one of the guys out of the ring, and they have a one-on-one match for another 20 minutes.
Oh, before I forget, I had another note here that, and this is funny because Dave LaGreca on Busted Open was talking about this, you know, bumping into Henry Winkler. Henry Winkler did a movie loosely based on Gorgeous George, as I'm sure John.
The greatest.
My one and only.
Oh, the one and only. That's right.
My one and only. And Gene was hired to be sort of what Chavo Guerrero Jr. is now for so many projects, from Lucha Underground and a zillion things. Is the wrestling choreographer, sort of like his Uncle Mondo was for the original 80s Glow. So,
and Chavo did for the Glow series on Netflix, actually.
Oh yeah, that too. And I forget if he was involved at all in WOW, or if it was just primarily the former Bambi. I forget her real name. Serena something or other.
Selena Majors.
Yeah, Selena Majors. So Gene got Chavo, Piper, Donnie Fargo, all guys from our territory. Fabulous Frank Monte. There were some others to be the squash guys in the rapid succession for that. And Gene was also involved in the Paradise Alley Sly Stallone pro wrestling vehicle. And you look at some of the guys being tossed in that. There was Ray Stevens, Don Leo Jonathan. You only see them for a megasecond, but if you have a wrestling eye like the three of us, you'll pick up, right away all these tons and tons of guys that were getting hip tossed, etc. in that one. But Gene was responsible for all of these guys getting work, and so many other people that he got work for, that he helped with agents and all of this stuff. So I know I'm going back to him. Dory Funk Jr., who we'll be talking to in a couple of weeks with a new book out, had nothing but glowing things to say about Gene Lebell, helping him out, and Terry out, and Dory Sr., because the three of them came in when we had a territory war, the Lebell family against Vern Gagne, who came in, partnered up, I'm going to be brief, with Jack Kent Cooke, who owned he owned everything. He owned the Rams, he owned the Lakers and the Kings, he owned the fabulous Forum venue that the Lakers and Kings played at. But it was like early 69, late 68, I think 69, and no one had ever challenged the territory boundaries. So we had a very brief 2-show territory war. It wasn't like the Montreal Vachon Rougeau. It wasn't like Detroit Chic, Dick the Bruiser. This all like early 70s stuff. Or Annie Gunkel in Atlanta taken on and beating for nearly 2 years in terms of gross and net and audience tickets, the NWA Atlanta office, when she went AWOL after her husband died, and they didn't take care of her after her husband Ray Gunkel died in the ring with Ox Baker. So she decided to take on the NWA office. So Vern Gagne partners with Jack Kent Cooke. He brought in 2 big shows. The first one I was at, and it was Vern defending against Dick the Bruiser. The Vachons were on there. The Crusher, I think the Crusher is against Cowboy Bill Watts. It was stacked cards. They didn't go anywhere because the Lebell family and Gene Lebell was doing a lot of negotiating, as did Mike, obviously, with Sam Munchnick, who had like the territory send in everybody. And we had Nelson Royal come in, all these different wrestlers. We had like every match was like legit, not a work or carny main event. It was the opener, Jonathan, for the first Lebell show taking on the Vachons, which Gene reffed, was Don Leo Jonathan and King Curtis Iakea, and Roy sent down Pat Patterson, Ray Stevens to face. That's the opener. King Curtis, Don Leo Jonathan against Ray and Pat. Really pretty damn good. On top, Mil Mascaras Dory Funk Jr. defending against our America's champion, Mil Mascaras. On another one of the shows that really ended, because the Lebell shows would be on Friday, the next night, Vern Gagne shows, just a couple miles away at the Forum. But on the second one, it was he was just about to turn babyface with the Sheik in the Fred Blassie challenged Dory Funk Jr., the only time Fred Blassie, to my knowledge, had an NWA title shot. And then another stacked card with Mil Mascaras in a hair versus mask match, taking Bull Ramos's hair, and just an S-load of talent from all over the place. Luke Graham and Crybaby Cannon returning, and all of this great stuff. So anyway, Jonathan, before I interrupted you, but you were, I wasn't saying there's going to be anything returning to our territory days. That's impossible. Yeah. But with so many promotions, would you consider Billy Corgan's NWA, or say, I mean, even I can watch OPW Friday and Saturday nights on DirecTV, which is incredible. I can watch 2 different weekly OPW shows, 2-hour shows. There's NWA. I mean, would you consider those to be, when you're saying the rise of these smaller promotions and all of these guys streaming, and like all the success that with the Ric Flair last match, that was, I think, the first time the Starcast had. I can't think of his name now. I'm old.
Would we call that a
Conrad
success?
Thompson.
Yeah, Conrad Thompson. He's had 5 Starcasts, all major successes. However, that card was his first show, and it was an interpromotional. You talk about breaking the forbidden door. I mean, he had GCW, New Japan, CMLL Mexico, AEW, some WWF guys, WWF videos allowed. There's a couple of groups I'm forgetting.
Well, I think that's actually an interesting thing that you point out too, the idea that WWE is increasingly playing ball with this. If you remember, there's been a slew of retirements and different events over the last few years, and you're seeing increasingly cross-population. So AEW's been pretty generous in allowing Chris Jericho and Paul White to do video tributes to John Cena, for example. WWE allowed Jeff Jarrett, who recently ascended to a pretty senior position there, to work the main event of the Ric Flair show, assuming that it was booked after Jarrett started. But for him not only to be working it and to be on camera is a whole other thing, especially coming the same weekend as exactly that he's working a high-profile match at SummerSlam. Are we going to get to a full-on Forbidden Door? I kind of hope not. I think one of the positives that's come since the 1980s has been that you have the possibility of maintaining these kind of separate universes from one promotion to the next. I think it's great when they acknowledge a performer's history. Ric Flair coming to WWF in 1991, 1992 isn't going to be Ric Flair if he's not the real world's champion. But I think that you do kind of need to have that kind of separation to make each promotion have its own identity and to feel special. That said, I think that there's a lot more cross-pollination. I think that there's a ton of great wrestling in promotions, big and small. I think that the number of different venues for people to get exposure gives acts that wouldn't necessarily have another chance at a larger audience to get that and to show what they really can do in front of a whole new audience. I think that's one of the great things that Conrad Thompson's been able to do. I think he's basically reintroduced through his series of podcasts a whole set of wrestlers, other personalities, executives who really had kind of fallen off the radar for casual fans and brought their perspectives back to the mainstream and ultimately, frankly, gotten them jobs in WWE and AEW. The Flair show that we just talked about is the second biggest non-major federation gate.
And I wanted to get your thoughts on that show. Did you see it?
I saw parts of it. To be honest, I thought it was difficult to watch the main event. I'd actually written in my column that I had some pretty significant concerns about Flair getting into the ring at this point in his life. I'm glad that he was more or less okay. But that said, he's acknowledged that he passed out twice during the match.
Right.
So,
and it was garbage. His performance was garbage.
He's also a 76-year-old man who's got a history of heart trouble.
That's what you'd expect.
He shouldn't have been in there. And kudos to the three guys, particularly Lethal and Lethal and Jeff Jarrett and Andrade for carrying it. I mean, really, Lethal and Jarrett did a Herculean effort, because you remember the night before in WWE, Jeff Jarrett's a face reffing, the tag match, Usos and the Street Profits, and then now he's like killer heel doing old school killer stuff. I watched the entire card. It opened with Wolves against Motor City Machine Guns, I believe, and that was off the charts. Even though the Wolves, they're not gelling because they haven't teamed in ages, and Eddie Edwards is a completely different character now than he was. So it wasn't like them in their prime. It was still good. I mean, all of the matches were fun. And I think the cool thing, too, that both you guys might want to say some stuff on is, as we're, again, on the Gene Lebell tribute show, and he was doing commentary. And at the Flair's last match, Conrad's show, Shivani and David Crockett are, they can't really do commentary on these different promotions like New Japan or GCW, but the guys doing the English commentary for New Japan and GCW and CMLL, etc., were brought in to carry that heavy load, allowing Tony and David Crockett to shine, doing color and what they do. And they're so beloved. And in front of that, I don't know if that was the original. They recreated the 1985 Crockett, Turner set, that big white paneled thing. It was incredible. Really gave people an emotional rush. But guys, that was kind of cool too. I don't think anyone's ever done that before. Besides the matches and getting all of these. Yeah, it happened also for All Japan Women at the Tokyo Dome, the Marinpiad, where all of these groups, including WWE, sending Medusa as Alundra Blaze to battle her old All Japan Women foe, Bull Nakano, in one of the semi-mains. That had every group, JWP, FMW, sending ladies. So it was a barrage of groups from all over the world sending to one show, similar to what Conrad did. But the commentary thing was very unique. I loved the entire pay-per-view. I cut Flair slack. Shouldn't have been in the ring. I think he's 73 unless you put some ages on him, so a couple extra years. But yeah. But whatever. He got a payday. It made him happy. He didn't die, which was everybody's worry, especially exactly. Chris Cruz. Especially Chris Cruz. He really came out there and got heat, as Chris is wont to do. But and that reminds me of Gene Lebell when our promotion folded. So here's the crazy thing. I'll go back to December of 82. I think it was December 10th, 1982. Mike Lebell signs over and sells our office to Vince McMahon Jr. at least a year before Vince went national. And at the same time, a couple months prior, Roy Shire knows his office is, he's closing down his office in San Francisco, my secondary home base, shooting ringside for the program. And he knew Vince and Vern were coming in with their own shows before Vince went national. He's bringing in shows to Northern California at the Cow Palace, Vern Gagne across the bay at the Oakland Coliseum. So what does Roy Shire do? He wants to F it up for both of them, who he despised. And he goes first to the LA Times and the San Francisco Chronicle newspaper, exposed the biz the day after he retired, particularly the LA Times. He went right to them, exposed the biz, and he even said on my TV show, he was my co-host for about 2 years, for the length of that old Canvas Cavity, little tiny syndicated show. He said he did it, his words, to F it up for both of them. But the weird thing is, so Vince buys this, and he doesn't utilize it for about a year. He promised Mike Lebell he could be the local event promoter. That didn't last long, and he lost his paydays, and things kind of fell by the wayside for Mike Lebell, but not for Gene, who was, growing in popularity and stuff, and looking at all of this stuff going on. But anyway, I just want to throw that out there, throw in some more Gene stuff. Do we have any photos of Gene with Shayna Baszler? It's like every member of Ronda Rousey's 4 Horsewomen, Gene helped finesse and did his best with, while they were particularly in NXT, Jasmine Duke, and then now the other one who's vastly improving in AEW. Jonathan,
Marina Shafir.
Yeah, Marina Shafir. Now, and I guess they've gotten past the whole thing with Thunder Rosa and whatever that heat was with she and Britt Baker. The sandbagging thing. I think that's what people were kind of upset that they were blaming Thunder Rosa for that with her. But anyway, let me throw back to you guys because I know I interrupted Jonathan on that. But I just thought that commentary was very cool. I don't know if you got to see that, either of you guys. Did you, Russ, did you get to watch some of the clips of the Flair's last match show? Really, everything but the main event is what you should be watching, really.
No, I really didn't. I had no interest in it. I thought it would be the car wreck that everyone said it was going to be, and
the whole card was international matches being sent in. There was a lot of incredible stuff. How many people have not seen or know of GCW other than just thinking, oh, it's Nick Gage blood? And it's kind of almost, Jonathan, would you agree? It's sort of like what ECW evolved into around 94, 95, when it wasn't just blood matches, but you had Benoit and Eddie Guerrero, and soon Conan bringing in the Luchadors, Psychosis, La Parka, Ray Jr., etc., and the Eddie Guerrero, Dean Malenko series. But you had that underneath. So GCW's having like real matches. Sure, they got the gore stuff, but they're wise enough to have some other stuff and not, kill off an entire audience that doesn't want to see blood all night long.
Well, GCW, I think, is actually starting to occupy a bit of that ECW space. I think historically very different product. I think if you look at kind of 1, 2, 3 promotions in US and Canada, you would have at one point gone with ROH in that spot. But I think that obviously with them being at least in transition to being bought out by AEW, because there's a little bit of a snafu going on there, I think that GCW, where they're kind of occupying that space most strongly, is it's an incredibly creatively booked promotion. So yes, they've got a lot of the garbage wrestling, but frankly, I can take or leave. I'm not a huge fan of blood in general. I recognize that if you're telling a really compelling story, it's got a place, but I'm just not a fan of buckets of it everywhere, especially while we're still all fighting off a pandemic. But that said, right. One thing, the kind of storytelling that they've been able to do with Jon Moxley, for example, with Effie, speaking of representation, that there's a character that we really haven't seen used effectively the way this guy's done it.
Wait, did you see his ring entrance at their pay-per-view to Elton John's Yellow Brick Road? Was that not sensational?
Yeah, and one, there was a spot and Effie just recently fought Moxley, and there was a spot where they wind up kissing in the middle of the match. And that's not something that one would ever have expected to have happened, 20 years ago.
Kissed Gene Lebell on the lips towards the dying days of our territory. Adrian Street came in with Diamond Timothy Flowers, but obviously Miss Linda was accompanying Adrian, and he was.
Adrian Street was a fascinating character, and way ahead of his time.
Yeah. We'd love to get him on the show, but he wants to charge like $800. So
I'll get him on. I sent him a slew of photos as bribery, and I promised he could promote his. A lot of folks don't know he is one of the premier around the globe. He fixes Ferris wheels. He's like a carnival and county fair and circus. He's constantly busy with that. Besides, I think he still has his gear.
He's nearly 90 now. He's nearly 90.
No, Adrian Street's not that well.
He's in his 80s.
Yeah, he's like in his mid 80s.
The sad thing, the last time he came to an event I was at, a reunion, he had shaved his head. So no more. And then he would, he'd take off the wig. He was wearing like a gold dust wig and would take it off. And it looked sort of like what he used to look like as Exotic Adrian. But a lot of folks forget the one time I went to the UK in '73, he was there, and Al Hayes was Judo Al Hayes, was not Lord Al, as way later. And so one of the greatest heels of all time, people don't even know, Mick McManus. Some great names. We can talk about that another point because we're showing short shrift to Canadian promotions. I don't know. John, is the all women's promotion out of Montreal, are they still doing things, I'm hoping?
I haven't heard anything out of them in a while, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything.
Adrian Street was born in 1940. He's 82.
Okay.
So, yeah. Hopefully he won't be getting in the ring anytime soon.
He's in good shape.
Know.
It's smaller. A lot of these guys, it's hard watching friends of mine like Bruno and Neil Moskris. They drop masses. They don't need to be carrying all that weight around. And when you see them, particularly Moskris, who now, the last time I was with him, and he's still wrestling well into his 80s. I think he's, I don't want to speculate, like 86. But he put on 4 sweatshirts and then something like a muscle-looking shirt with a drawing of muscles on there, so he would look like the old Neil Moskris when he wasn't. He had shrunk. That's what happens, like to older folks.
Or you go the other way and you get huge. What you look forward to.
Wrestlers, though, they have to drop that mass. Like Bruno looked like a third of his size the last 10 years of his life. But let me read this on a couple of really quick things. I know I didn't get to all of them from all of these folks from AEW. I mean, Bryan Danielson talking about Gene Lebell and his times with him, and obviously paying tribute to him intentionally with the Lebell lock. But Jeff Walton, who was our PR person, he did our program in Los Angeles. He was like Mr. Everything. He just wore a zillion hats. Wrote, I had the honor to know Judo Gene, starting in 1967 when I first came to the Olympic Auditorium to work as a new publicity director for wrestling. My office was on the 2nd floor, so one day I walked out to see Gene wrestling in the ring with his students who wanted to become wrestlers. He made every one of them submit, though, in mere seconds. I went downstairs to meet Lebell for the very first time. After meeting him, he invites me to work out at his LA City College gym, which he used on Monday nights to work out with his true regular students. I humbly and wisely declined his kind offer and hurried back upstairs, not wanting to get stretched. Gene was a very, very, very tough man. He was extremely generous with his time and knowledge to everybody. He'd give you the shirt off his back if you needed it. He loved his motorcycles and movie stunt work more than anything, and he was known for so much more. I worked closely with Gene on the production of our wrestling TV shows every week, and he worked hard on learning to announce wrestling and get over the angles his brother Mike had written out on a weekly basis. Judo Gene Lebell was a multifaceted star and author of many books on the martial arts and judo. So many stories, so little space. I will miss you, Gene. And he also wrote that Klaus Landsberg was the head of KTLA Los Angeles Channel 5, who started wrestling, I think earliest TV wrestling in 1948, when TV was just developing and they needed any kind of programming. The Hollywood Wrestling office was located on Sunset Boulevard, but once Jules Strongbow was semi-retired, the office was moved directly to the Olympic up on the 2nd floor, which is where I would go, every week to drop off my photos. The office was there. That's where I got to know both Jules and Gene. We'd have the booking meetings Monday mornings. Sander Zaba was out of the office by then. Charlie Moto was, of course, part of Jules Strongbow dream team of booking. And I have so many others. Mark Dawson again. Well, Rich Marzulli sent this just now. Gene got to see, obviously, that entire era from the inside. And again, here's the Bearcat Wright story. Jonathan, or either one of you guys ever heard Gene Lebell, the Bearcat Wright stretch story?
I have not.
All right. Let me let him tell it, or I'll get to it in a sec. But Rich Marzulli, friend of Evan Ginsberg and myself and Russ, was always enjoyed seeing Gene on TV, the Munsters, where he would bring and get work on a lot of other shows, not just Jack Benny for our local area wrestlers, Alaskan Jay York, the great John L., Count Billy Varga, etc. And he, of course, Gene ref Ali Inoki there with Carl Gotch in Inoki's corner. You remember when Inoki started New Japan in December 72? Who are the first 2 guys he brings in for cred? He brings in Thez and Carl Gotch. Gene Lebell, and I verified with both Thez and Gotch, said those were the guys who trained him for pro. Thez more so than Carl Gotch. But there's some photos I was not able to find to send Russ of Gene in the middle between Thez and Gotch at that 76 Ali Inoki Danny Westbrook, photographer with me ringside, along with my sensei, Theo Arrett. You'll remember him from Apartment House Wrestling, those creepy photos in Pro Wrestling, or the Wrestler and Inside Wrestling. Pro Wrestling Illustrated hadn't even started yet for those Stanley Weston series of mags. Gene told me his side of it, and I'll include the Bearcat Wright story. So here it is. I'll get to this. But Bearcat Wright refused to drop, I forget what the rationale was, 63, when WWA was our wrestling office, and we had a world champ and world tag champions. Dick the Bruiser one time left with our belt, didn't return it, and then what does he call his promotion he forms in Indianapolis well after the WWA formed World Wrestling Alliance in LA in 59? But about right after Dick left, I think it was 65, he calls his promotion the WWA in Indianapolis, and that would be the promotion with Lebell with the Sheik when Bruiser tried to infringe from Indianapolis to Detroit. So here's the story. Bearcat Wright is supposed to drop the WWA World title back. And you remember, it wasn't Ron Simmons who was the first Black African-American world champion. It was Bobo Brazil and Bearcat Wright for us in LA. And the WWA was actually had more representation at that early 60s period than even the AWA. So it's considered, it truly was, I'm not BSing here, second only to the NWA, because the WWA title be defended all up and down the West Coast, in Honolulu, and of course Japan with Ricky Dosen taking it, a couple of times.
We're running out of time for the show, so can you get to the story real fast?
So Bearcat refuses to drop the strap, and there's either one of two stories. He goes into the ring to face who he thinks is Blassie, but instead it's Gene Lebell, a shooter hooker in a full body hangman suit. But the story most people tell is that he refuses to drop the strap. He runs away from the ring, goes out to the parking lot. This is Bearcat Wright with the WWA belt, sees Gene Lebell there ready to shoot on him, pees in his pants, drops the belt, gets in his car, leaves. He's banned for about 3 years, or maybe not quite so banned, but he came back. He had to apologize big time for that whole mess. And, but he was never the same star he was with a world title put on him in LA as he was. And we just don't know the reasons. And the other weird thing was Bearcat Wright, along with the Sheik's Amazing Zulu, the minute Roy Shire retires, they went to court in San Francisco to sue Roy Shire, accusing him of being a racist promoter and underpaying them in comparison to the white, Anglo-Saxon wrestlers. So that is our story. Gene Lebell scared everybody. One of the kindest, gentlest, nicest guys on the planet. I'm sorry I went overboard talking. Jonathan, do you have anything to plug? Let's let you plug before.
Yeah, please. Let's have you plug it.
Well, my column runs every 2 weeks on slamwrestling.net. There's a whole bunch of great content other than myself, along with very, very quick updates on the latest pay-per-views and weekly TV shows. And if you're looking for some really great analysis, interviews, coverage of the recent Cauliflower Alley event that happened, and the awards that are and the awards there, all kinds of great stuff there. I'm available at wrestlers.court.js@gmail.com. My latest column just came out this morning. I look at the fact that we may just be in a golden age of comebacks between CM Punk and Edge, and the fact that they're working all of these recently released, now rehired talents back into the WWE mix. And in a post-Vince McMahon landscape, what does that look like? About 2 weeks ago, in the wake of Vince actually retiring, I actually wrote a pretty long piece looking at what WWE needs to do from a corporate governance and from a creative standpoint. What are some of the things they can do to chart a new course? And I'm heartened to see that at least some of that seems to be coming true, and hopefully we'll keep going there. One of the big things I was hoping to discuss with Darla, and hopefully I'll have that chance at some point, is actually improving representation both in front of and behind the cameras. The more different voices we get, the more fans we can reach from all different backgrounds, the better a product we're going to have.
Definitely. Women, minority, well, I wouldn't even call them minorities, but other than just old white male wrestlers. Russ, do you have stuff to plug or anything?
No, I don't. And we are out of time. So we'll have to catch up with Jonathan again very soon.
Jonathan on regularly.
Yes, he's you're a fantastic guest. Really love having you on, and looking forward to seeing everybody next week. Thanks, everyone, for being
here. Lebell, combate kudasai. Domo arigatou gozaimashite.
Good night, everybody.
Good night. Thank you.